should you start, and which players should you sit in week 2 of the fantasy football season? Welcome, football fans and fantasy freaks. It's Mitch here with my starts and sits for week 2 of the fantasy football season. Every position, quarterback through tight end, I'm giving you 3 starts, 3 sits for each position. And I'm not giving you the easy starts. I'm talking sleepers. I'm talking flex plays. I'm talking streamers. I'm really giving you the tough decisions. And any other questions you have, the place to go is the comment section below. Because I will answer your question. I might not always be right, but I'll give you my best guess and my best advice to help your lineup. So if you want to ask a question, just let me know and I'll respond, okay? If that sounds good, Gronk spike the like button for weekly fantasy football starts and sits just like this. Let's get to it, beginning at the quarterback position. Geno Smith is my first start on Monday Night Football. I think Geno is going to have to keep up with Justin Herbert at home in the Vegas, bright lights, prime time, everyone's watching. Herbert may have been the second best quarterback in football last week, only behind Josh Allen. And Geno Smith, believe it or not, the Raiders led the NFL in neutral pass rate against the New England Patriots. If they threw the ball a lot against the Patriots in the rain, they're probably going to throw the ball a lot against the Chargers because they're probably going to need to score more points than they needed to score against the New England Patriots. Brock Bowers should be playing. I think his receivers are fast. Thornton, Tucker. Myers looked great despite the contract negotiations. He looked fantastic last week. And Geno, man, accurate as ever, composed as ever, tough as nails. He's going to throw the ball downfield. And I felt like Mahomes definitely was able to make some plays against the Chargers. This is not a crazy good Charger defense. Sure, last year they didn't allow a lot of points. But anytime they played a good quarterback, seemingly they would allow points. They would allow yards, right? I think that this Raider offense is a little underrated. I think their passing game specifically is a little underrated. And most importantly, they want to throw the ball, and in a game that could have a lot of points, I think Geno is actually a sneaky good start here. Trevor Lawrence, another game that could feature a lot of points versus Cincinnati. What I specifically like about Lawrence this week is the Bengals are a lot better against the run than Carolina. So I advised you to start Lawrence last week. He had a fine game. It wasn't anything special, right? But a lot of that came down to the fact that he didn't need to have a great game because they simply handed the ball off to Travis Etienne. And this week, the Bengals, they shut down Cleveland's run game. They actually have 2 really good defensive tackles against the run, Hill and Slayton. Hendrickson and Stewart can stop the run too on the edges. The Bengals are much better against the run than the pass. On top of that, Jacksonville's defense is going to be tested a lot more than what Carolina gave them last week. First of all, they're on the road in Cincinnati. Second, Jamar Chase, Chase Brown, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, right? And the Bengals had a bad game against the Browns offensively. I think they're going to bounce back. This is a higher total. This is a game against the Bengals. It's likely to be a shootout. It's likely to have a lot of points. I think Lawrence, his best way to win is by throwing to Brian Thomas and Travis Hunter, not by running the ball with ETN. That's what Liam Cohen is going to see too. So I think Lawrence is going to have to keep up with Burrow. He's going to have to throw the ball. I think that makes him a good fantasy start. Drake May against Miami. Let's make it simple. If Daniel Jones can look like Peyton Manning, If he can start to get nicknames like Indiana Jones against the Miami Dolphins and Storm Duck, then Drake May could have a good game too. And if you're wondering, you don't know who Storm Duck is, it's a corner on the Dolphins. Yeah. They're pretty desperate. They're really bad. And Miami, down south, a lot more Drake May style. He's from North Carolina. He'll be used to the heat. He'll be used to the environment. And I think he's going to bring the heat in this game. I love what I saw from Kayshon Boutte. I'm expecting better things and bigger things this week, and we'll talk about that. He seemed to have good rapport with Hunter Henry again this year, and he's still trying to figure out this offense. I think what really derailed May from having a really good fantasy day last week was the rain. He didn't have a bad game considering everything, honestly, but he could have had a much better game if not for the rain. It's not going to rain in Miami, and Miami's secondary is atrocious. So I expect May to have a pretty big day here, especially if the Dolphins are scoring more than we think they will. Next, Tua turned the ball over. He's sitting on the bench until further notice. The Patriots didn't exactly play spectacularly well against Geno, but they did provide 4 sacks. They also had an interception, and this is a very solid pass rush of the Patriots. Tua really struggled against pressure last week. Tua really struggled when he couldn't go to his first read. Miami couldn't get the run game going. I don't expect them to be able to against the Patriots. Milton Williams, Harold Landry, Christian Barmore, they're going to eat Tua's lunch. And if Christian Gonzalez is back, that's even worse. So, yeah, Tua, the Dolphins in general, not startable really at this moment. They look like a complete disaster with zero belief. So I'm not starting him. Aaron Rodgers. This is an interesting one because he played really well against the Jets. He had 4 touchdowns against his former team in New York. This week, though, he faces a much stiffer challenge in Seattle. Seattle led the NFL last week in pressure percentage, 33% against Brock Purdy. Aaron Rodgers can't move like Brock Purdy, right? And he doesn't have Trent Williams. Even though it's at home, right? I still feel like Rodgers is going to get sacked a lot. He's going to get pressured a lot. And Seattle's secondary is nasty. I think this is a very low-scoring game. I think Rodgers has very modest statistics and a total polar opposite game script from what we saw against the Jets where he was slinging the rock. So I think Rodgers is not a fantasy start this week. Baker Mayfield. Basically, any quarterback that plays the Texans in Houston is not a great start. We even saw it with Josh Allen last year. It's just a nasty defense, a nasty environment. It's Monday Night Football. It's prime time. It's loud. It's rowdy. And the Texans have a devastating pass rush. They got after Stafford. They held the Rams to 14 points. Baker doesn't have Tristan Wirfs to block Will Anderson or Danielle Hunter. Mike Evans will be shadowed by Derek Stingley. And he doesn't have Chris Godwin, right? The run game wasn't good last week. I think the Texans are going to take it to Tampa on that side of the ball. I would sit Baker despite his solid performance last week with 3 touchdowns. He also had a lot of incompletions. My running back starts. I'm going with Benson as a sleeper versus Carolina. I'll be at this game. I expect Arizona to be able to run the ball. Carolina was the worst run defense last year. They looked atrocious versus Travis Etienne in Jacksonville. And Benson hit a home run against the Saints last week. I could see him hitting a home run in this game. I could see him mixing in with Connor in this game. I could see the Cardinals really running the ball against Carolina like a lot. So if Benson does hit a home run, I wouldn't be surprised. I think he is a flexible player this week. Javonte Williams versus the Giants. I like him as an RB2. The Giants are actually very overrated against the run. They were not a very good run defense last year. They weren't a very good run defense against Washington. And the Dallas Cowboys showcased some things against Philly early in that game. I like what they were doing under center with the heavy formations. You know, Schottenheimer is a run specialist from his father on down. You know, what he was able to do with the Jets back in the day, Seattle, like all throughout his tenure, he has been a run-centric guy. And Javonte Williams looked solid. He certainly looked better than Miles Sanders. He's also their red zone presence. He's their red zone back, short yardage guy. He could score 2 touchdowns in this game. That wouldn't be surprising whatsoever against a team that they're 6-point favorites against. Remember, they were 8.5-point dogs against Philly, and they're at home in Dallas, where Dallas typically does score a lot of points with Dak Prescott. So Javonte's a really good start this week. Kenneth Walker versus Pittsburgh is a risky start, but I would do it. Pittsburgh was atrocious against the Jets run game. I do think that the Seahawks will have more success here, more of an emphasis on the run than they did against the 49ers. The 49ers know how to stop that running game. It's Kyle Shanahan's running game. Robert Saleh knows that running game, right? He sees it in practice every day. Like, San Francisco has a good idea of how to contain it. Pittsburgh plays a polar opposite style of defense. They don't, exactly thrive against the zone scheme. I do feel like Kenneth Walker is going to be able to get the edge here. I do feel like they're going to give the ball to Walker more this week than they did last week. Probably looking back at the tape last week and saying, like, we need more explosiveness in this offense. He is the biggest, most explosive guy we got. And it was a failure last week for him. He looked like a total fantasy bust. But I do believe that he'll get back on track this week. I don't know if it's going to be like what we thought from him, where he's getting 60-70% of the touches, but I just feel like his efficiency and his overall game will be better this week against a team that really struggled against the Jets to stop the run. So I would give Walker another chance this week. Running back sits. Nick Chubb versus Tampa. Tampa's really good against the run. Last year, they were a top 3 team in yards per attempt allowed, top 3 in success rate. They might have even been first, if I'm not mistaken. And Nick Chubb, he really didn't do much until the end of the game when the Rams were playing the pass, right? Also, we've got a plethora of running backs working into his workload. We're talking about Dameon Pierce. We're talking about a Dubinwale, however you say his name at this point. Woody Marks could always factor in as well. And I do believe the Texans will be more pass-heavy in this game against a Bucs team that is kind of a pass funnel. Teams don't try to run against the Bucs. So Nick Chubb, to me, just doesn't have a lot of upside in this matchup facing Vita Vea and the boys. Jaylen Warren against Seattle. Don't love really any of the Steelers against Seattle. I just really believe in that defense. And Seattle did a good job of really containing Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey had 31 total touches. He did end up with, I think, like 9 catches. So yeah, Warren could have a few catches. But if you really watched Christian McCaffrey, like, he was running like proper routes, option routes, playing out wide and empty formations, like motioning out of the backfield. Like, Warren doesn't do that stuff. Nobody really does that stuff except for Christian McCaffrey, right? So like, it's very specific scheming, very specific route running, very specific ways of attacking a defense. Jaylen Warren is more of like a swing pass guy, a screen guy. I don't really see how he's like a Christian McCaffrey passing threat in PPR formats. If he hits an explosive, he hits an explosive. Also, Kenneth Gainwell had more snaps than Warren last week. Like, that is not a good thing. Kenneth Gainwell did, right? Warren, I don't see them running on Seattle that effectively. They couldn't run on the Jets, who are a weaker run defense than Seattle. Ever since they got Ernest Jones, man, they've been a really good run defense, and that's a very stiff interior led by Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy. Isaiah Pacheco versus Philly. Pacheco is getting touches taken away from him from Kareem Hunt, and he's just not really getting a lot of opportunity. What did he get, like 5 carries last week? Maybe the Chiefs will try to establish the run, but with Jalen Carter back in the fold and Jordan Davis, good luck running the ball up the middle. Like, the Chiefs just don't have a run game. They really don't have a run game. They are one of the weakest run teams in football. I'm not trusting Pacheco. Even his pass upside is limited. So I don't love the matchup. I would sit him. Wide receiver starts. I'm still trusting Ricky Pearsall despite maybe Mac Jones playing. We're not 100% sure, but it could be a pretty strong possibility. Mac Jones, I feel like, will funnel targets to Ricky Pearsall. When he became the Jacksonville starter, he really honed in on, let's throw the ball to Brian Thomas, right? Like, a big part of Brian Thomas's breakout as a rookie was Mac Jones, just like hucking him the ball. I do believe that Ricky Pearsall is a really good football player, right? I do believe that, hey, we saw Marvin Harrison go off last week. Cardinals fans may not want to hear it, but Ricky Pearsall might be better than Marvin Harrison. I mean, the last 3 games he's played for the 49ers, he leads the NFL in receiving yards. Like, so he's pretty good. You know, like he's a really good route runner. He's very quarterback safe, like quarterback friendly, because he is a separator. He's a good route runner and he makes tough contested catches. He's also a guy that Shanahan seems to scheme up like 2 to 3 times in a game on a specific route at a specific time, and it's an intentional target. So I really like that about his role. Plus, Jennings is hurt. He may play, but he's really banged up. Kittle's out. I mean, someone has to catch the ball. It's not going to be Kendrick Bourne and Valdez Scantling all the time. A lot of targets are going to be going to Ricky Pearsall because he's their guy. Devontae Smith versus the Chiefs. Devontae Smith, if I'm not mistaken, you know, a couple years ago, not last year's Super Bowl, but a couple years ago, he led the Super Bowl in receiving yards. So he has a history of performing against the Chiefs, for sure. The Chiefs really struggled against Quentin Johnston. And if they do put Trent McDuffie more so on A.J. Brown, I think that would really allow Devontae Smith to thrive. Also, Dallas Goedert could be out of this game. Dallas Goedert has had some good moments against the Chiefs as well in those Super Bowls, but I would say was really involved last week. And whenever Dallas Goedert is not as involved or is injured, Devontae Smith's stock rises. He starts to get more of those underneath targets, more of those quarterback-friendly targets, closer to the line of scrimmage, because that's not really A.J. Brown's game. So Devontae Smith, his floor rises when Dallas Goedert doesn't play, and it doesn't appear that he will. So I feel like Devontae Smith not only has that ceiling of big plays down the field and touchdowns, but also a little bit more of a floor this week against the Chiefs. I expect both those receivers, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, to perform against Kansas City. Kayshon Boutte of the New England Patriots. It looks like he could be Drake May's number 1 receiver. 3 out of his last 4 games with Drake May, he's gone over 1,000 yards. That would be pretty impressive. 100 yards. And he does far and away lead Drake May targets dating back to last year in air yards as well. He is the X receiver on the outside for the Patriots offense. And Drake May was consistently finding him on third downs, on back shoulders and contested targets, and using his body control and his ability to box out defenders to catch the ball. He's also a guy that's going to be a splash play player, 15, 20 yards downfield, deep in breakers, right, to the sidelines on comebacks. Boutte looks impressive. Plus, he's a real deep threat against a secondary that doesn't have great speed, against a secondary that doesn't have a true shutdown corner. I feel like he could get behind them and make a huge play down the field. So I think he's a great start. If you picked him up, this is one of the worst secondaries in football. It's the same role Michael Pittman was featured in last week, who had such a big game. I think Boutte goes off. Wide receiver sits. Keon Coleman against the Jets. I did mention Keon Coleman as a sit last week. I was looking fine until, that crazy comeback, but I apologize for that if you did sit Coleman because of my advice. I actually sat Coleman in one of my leagues, and I didn't pay the price for it. I still won the matchup, but it would have been nice to have him in the lineup. I am a believer in Coleman this year, weirdly enough. Like, I've drafted him plenty in best ball, drafted him, in a couple leagues, in my own leagues, and I like him. It's just that, last week he played the defense that I thought was the best secondary in football. They didn't look like it, but it was kind of a unique scenario. This week he plays Sauce Gardner, who last week was PFF's number 1 graded corner, is one of the best corners in football, is the highest paid corner in football, and probably will shadow Coleman because Coleman was Josh Allen's favorite target last week. He is the big receiver who plays on the perimeter most of the time. And Coleman might move around a bit to avoid him, but I think overall, it's just not the strongest matchup. Like, most likely you drafted Coleman as your wide receiver 4 or your wide receiver 5. Probably not a starter, per se. And, I don't think this is the best matchup. I think there's other guys you can play over him this week, is kind of what I'm saying. He still could have a good game. I wouldn't be surprised if he scored a touchdown. So you can start him. It's just, it feels like the upside's capped if Sauce really takes him for much of the game. Michael Pittman Jr., I'm fading after a good performance last week. because he's playing Pat Surtain, who is widely regarded as the best corner in football. And I would very much expect Michael Pittman to draw that, very much so, because he's the big outside perimeter target in the offense. Josh Downs is not that guy, right? And Pat Surtain's probably not going to shadow Alec Pierce, okay? So I feel like Pittman comes back down to earth, mostly due to the matchup of playing probably the best corner in football. Jalen Waddle against New England, he's already banged up. He's a liability to get hurt at any point in this game. And again, if the Patriots do have Gonzo and Carlton Davis, which they may not, but they might, that's just not good because you have two really good corners that could shadow Waddle and take him out of the game. And it just feels like Waddle has not been featured in this offense for a long, long time. Like, not in week one, really not last year. Tyreek's just complaining all the time. They're going to get the ball to A-Shane. Like, Waddle's an afterthought. It's actually really frustrating. At tight end, Evan Ingram versus the Saints. They're not the Saints. I'm drunk. Evan Ingram, his coach, is formerly from the Saints. There you go. I worked it in somehow. Versus Indianapolis. Indy, is interesting because I feel like Ingram is going to have to feature in the middle of the field. The Colts linebackers in coverage are a little suspect. I think that Ingram can work that area. Bo Nix was very scattershot. He was very all over the place mentally last week. Some easy targets for his tight end would be ideal to get his momentum going. The new defensive coordinator of the Colts is Lou Anarumo, who was the defensive coordinator of the Bengals last year. The Bengals were the worst team against tight ends in the NFL last year. The Colts did play well defensively against Miami, but I do feel like there are susceptibilities in the middle. I do think Ingram needs to get going for the sake of this offense. Somebody other than Sutton needs to make a play, and it could be Ingram here. I also would say that the Colts were third worst against tight ends last year, and the Titans were third best, okay? Brenton Strange plays the Cincinnati Bengals. Dr. Strange. He plays the Bengals. The Bengals were the worst team against tight ends last year, as I just mentioned. Strange played pretty damn well against Carolina. He was heavily featured early in the game. And we saw Fannin and Njoku draw plenty of targets against the Bengals. I think the tight end will be heavily featured in the game plan here. Hunter Henry against Miami. Ty Warren went nuclear, almost, against the Dolphins. Hunter Henry had a very solid stat line last week, over 60 yards. I think he could score a touchdown in this game. He's a third down chain mover. The Dolphins have terrible safeties. I feel like just a terrible secondary in general. I think Hunter Henry is going to have another good game here, and you could probably pick him up and start him. Tight end sits. Jawan Johnson against the 49ers. A lot of people probably going to be not a fan of this one because you probably just picked him up. But I don't love tight ends against the 49ers. They have very good linebackers. Fred Warner is the best in the game, and they have D. Winters really breaking out at the moment at linebacker. They're very good at covering the middle of the field. They traditionally always have been, specifically under Robert Saleh. And Jawan Johnson doesn't feel like the guy that's going to warrant 11 targets two weeks in a row, 8 catches 2 weeks in a row. I feel like he'll have games like that, but I don't think it's going to be constant, okay? So I think in this matchup, where the Niners defense has to pick up the slack without Purdy, I'd sit Johnson. Colston Loveland versus Detroit. Until he starts playing more and is more of a focus of the offense, I can't start him. Detroit's pretty good against tight ends overall. They have very good linebackers and very good safeties. They're very good in that area of the field. And I just don't see the appeal. I don't see the upside. Kmet played quite a bit, probably more than Loveland on a snap percentage basis. Loveland only had 2 catches. Again, when he was out there, wasn't really featured. So I would sit him. And then Travis Kelce's kind of a surprising one because they need someone to catch the ball. And sure, he might provide like a solid baseline, a solid floor. But Philly has Zach Bond, and now they have Jahad Campbell out of Alabama in the first round. Those linebackers looked fantastic in coverage last week. Best area of the defense for Philly against Dallas. Ferguson was very much capped in terms of his yak, very much capped in terms of his vertical dimension. Kelce will catch some short passes, but I don't think any of his targets will go anywhere the way they did last week, where he was breaking away from the defense on a perfectly schemed up play by Andy Reid. So those are my starts. and my sits for week 2 of the 2025 fantasy football season. If you enjoyed, Gronk spike the like button and don't forget to subscribe. It's Mitch. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.